Let's take a question from John D. Should Christians be concerned by how often NDEs don't seem to correspond or line up with much of what we are taught, theologically speaking, about the afterlife, God, heaven, hell, etc.? Does it call into question the Bible's veracity? Why or why not?
Yeah, NDEs are near-death experiences, and classically people have an episode where they die in some sense. They call them near-death because they return, but by different clinical standards, they're actually dead. Yet when they return, they recount experiences they've had of going to heaven, characteristically occasionally going to hell. But there is such a plethora of these experiences that demonstrate diversity, and many of them don't seem to match up with, like the questioner asked, what the Scripture says. So what do we make of that? And the answer is that I think we ought to be very, very careful. Even the Christian accounts seem to be inconsistent in many ways. When I say Christian, I mean these so-called, even when people who identify as Christians have these experiences and say, here's what I saw when I went to heaven. Oh, like that little boy, for example. I can't remember his name, but there's a lot of these, and they sell a lot of books because they're sensationalistic. I think what we ought to do is take our cues from what heaven is like from God and not from other people's experiences. The same thing is true about any religious truth. Okay, there are times when people's experience is compatible with what Scripture says, and I'm thinking one in particular that I've read that I thought, and I can't even remember the title of it, so I won't recommend it. I have it, but I remember J.P. Moreland recommending it, and I thought this is one of those things that seem to comport more than any others with the scriptural details that we have of the afterlife. But many of them are farcical, and they support other worldviews. And one of the things that Gary Habermas, who has researched this quite a bit, has said about that is people see things in these NDEs, and then they interpret them in light of their own background. So they might see a divine-type figure, or one that looks like a divine figure. Well, if they're Christians, they're going to say, I saw Jesus. But if they're Hindus, they're going to say, I saw Krishna. So that it's not as if the experience itself in every case is self-interpreting, but rather one has the experience and has to interpret it for himself, and so their own biases are going to come through. So you're going to get this wide variety of things. Gary, who is a very careful researcher, doesn't make draw any conclusions about the content of what people experience. All right. No theological conclusions. He draws conclusions about the implications of NDEs for worldviews. So if one has an out-of-body experience that is veridical, in other words, it's true, it actually took place, and can be demonstrated to have been the case through evidence, so it's evidentially substantiated, like remote viewing, where a person leaves their location, goes somewhere else, sees something that they would not have known about, returns, and then tells people about it when they come back, too. Well, I went around the hospital and I saw this red shoe on the top of the hospital, or I went back home and everybody's eating chicken and dumplings, and here's the conversation they had. Well, none of this would have been available to them in the natural. And what this does is gives clear evidence that there is a soul that's separate from the human body, and so naturalism, in virtue of that testimony, would be refuted, and that's where Gary goes with that. But he doesn't go much farther than that. So, except to make the point that there is an afterlife, because sometimes there are experiences that people have with others on the other side who they don't know are dead. But when they come back, they talk about it, and then they learn later those people just died or died earlier, and there was no knowledge of it. So that's another point of verification that there is an afterlife, but the nature of the afterlife is still an open question from Gary's perspective based on NDEs. But it is not an open question from Gary's perspective, based on Scripture. And so that's the pecking order.
And it's hard to know exactly what people are seeing when they're not actually, they're separated from their body, but this isn't their final death. They come back. So we don't know exactly where they've been or what they've seen or who's been talking to them. Like we don't know any of those things. So I think you're right, Greg. We learn that your mind can be separated from your body, that it can outlive your body. And that's the main thing that we thing that we learn from this. So I think Gary Habermas's approach is a good one here.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the book. He and J.P. Moreland wrote a book called
I think it's Beyond Death.
There's another one. They did the same book twice with different titles. I think the original title was Immortality with Thomas Nelson, and then Beyond Death was the same material, expanded now, especially the NDE section, by Gary's contribution to that book. So probably Beyond Death is the title that people can get now, and it's really it's great. It's a great book.